Welcome back, all you awakened savages. And if you've clicked on today's video, this is not an accident. You're either smack bang in the middle of a dark night of the soul, or you're about to go through it. But either way, today's video will give you the information that you need to understand why all of a sudden your career feels meaningless. Your marriage is maybe distant. The goals that used to drive you, you've lost that fire. Right? Maybe you're waking up like I did at 3 a.m., just staring at the ceiling, wondering, is this it? Is this what I've spent my whole life building? Right? See that restlessness? That isn't a problem you need to fix. This is your soul trying to wake you up. Right? And most men your age have already given up. They've accepted that passion dies after 40. They've convinced themselves that feeling alive is for the younger men. They're so fucking wrong. See, what you're experiencing isn't a breakdown, although it can feel like one. It's a breaking open. And see, if you handle it right, it will be the making of you. But if you fuck this up and handle it wrong, you will join the ranks of many men who spent the last 30, 40 years just sleepwalking through life, wondering what happened to that fire that I used to feel, that passion, that desire. And they'll have a head full of regrets and what ifs. And I'm not going to let that happen to you. So what is a dark night of the soul actually? I also call it the lone wolf stage because that's the phrase that I used because that's what I felt like. I felt like a lone wolf. But the more globally accepted phrase is dark night of the soul. Now, this isn't a midlife crisis. That's what weak men call it when they blow up their lives chasing 20-somethings in fancy sports cars. This is something far deeper and more powerful. This is your soul saying, the man that you've been pretending to be, his time is up, right? It's time to meet who the fuck you actually are. So for the first 40 years of your life, right, you might have just played by the rules, worked hard, provided for your family, kept your head down, didn't rock the boat, you were responsible, reliable, you were what everyone else needed you to be. And it worked until it didn't work, right? Or maybe you were like me, where your life is full of fucking chaos and madness and self-sabotage and destruction. Either way, it doesn't matter. Because see now, your soul is done with that program. Everything you've built your identity on, your job title, your bank account, your reputation, other people's approval, it stops working. And it's not because you've failed, it's because you've outgrown it. Right? When you go through this dark night of the soul, it strips away everything that isn't authentically you. And it can be fucking brutal because most of what you thought was you was just conditioning, programming, right? A role that you learned to play so that you could survive. And you played it so well that you forgot it was just a role. Right? Society told you to be the good provider, be the responsible father, be the reliable husband. Don't ask too many questions. Don't want too much. Don't dream too big. And your soul's saying, nah, fuck that. That's not enough anymore. In fact, that was never enough. This phase isn't punishment, right? It can feel like punishment, but I promise you it's preparation. You're being prepared for the man that you were meant to become in the second half of your life. The man who is done with performing and he is ready just to be, right? You're done with approval and you're the one who will actually give the guidance, right? The man who's no longer running from the truth of who he is and he's living from that truth. Okay, but there's what most men don't understand is this isn't automatic and actually most men don't make it through this. Right, because what happens is they end up medicating it or escaping it or convince themselves that it's just stress from work. Right, they numb out with alcohol, affairs, porn, endless distractions. They end up jumping on antidepressants and told that they've got a chemical imbalance. They're convinced by well-meaning people that they just need to get back out there, go and find a hobby. And then they die never actually truly meeting themselves. And see, if I've got anything to do with that, you are not going to be one of them. Right, so how do I know about this? Right, I've went through this on more than one occasion, right? But my latest one was a walk through hell, literally, right? Just under 2 years ago. And I've spoke about this before. I thought I had everything figured out. My coaching business was on fire. I was working with some amazing men, law enforcement, ex-military business owners, and I was helping them step into their true power. right? I'd also started a podcast. It was gaining traction. I had a bunch of guests. My family was solid. And from the outside, everything looked great. Okay, but there was something inside me was stirring. It was shifting. And at first, I just ignored it. Right? I just told myself that, listen, this is just the natural ups and downs of business and life. Right? Maybe I was a bit tired. Maybe I'd been working so hard and I needed a holiday. But then things started to fall apart. Right? My in-person clients, they started disappearing one by one. And they had their reasons, right? Life changes, family situations, new jobs. And they all said quite clearly it was nothing to do with me, right? But you know how your mind works when, you're starting to feel a bit exposed. And I found myself smack bang in the middle of that old mental space, right? You second guessing myself, running those mental loops. What did I do wrong? Am I sabotaging another good thing? Why does this all has happened to me? And I just tried to I tried to push my way through it. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to go all in on the podcast. And for a while, right? It worked. I had some amazing guests, some big guests with big followings, with some powerful stories to tell. And at that spark kind of came back. I felt alive. Passion was back flowing and things looked like they were back on track. But then the universe had a different plan for me, right? One day my wife was at lunch with her best friend and she collapsed. No warning signs, nothing. Her friend, she called me in a total panic, hysterically in tears, crying, and she tried to explain what happened. But all I heard was we couldn't find her pulse and we thought she was dead. And for a split second, my world collapsed. But then she said, but thankfully the paramedics came and they've brought her back round. So she survived, right? And thank God. But see that moment, that brush with losing the most important person in my world, it changed everything. That day marked the beginning of an entirely new journey, and it's one that we're still on as a family right now. Okay, but then we moved through into Christmas, right? Into the new year, and something still wasn't right, That spark that I had, it was gone, right? The passion that I'd felt, that was fading really fast. And at first I was like, you know what? Christmas has just been, it's a holiday blues. But by the end of January, it was not lifting. It was actually getting worse. And I just kept telling myself, listen, it's temporary. Maybe it's a trauma response for what happened with Jenna, stress. I'll bounce back like I always do. But I didn't, right? By mid-February, I'd completely gone inwards, stopped picking up the phone to people. I was avoiding conversations. I couldn't deal with any surface level bullshit. My bullshit reader was like fucking, and I cut out social media. I cut out family. I cut out everything, right? My nervous system just couldn't fucking tolerate anything anymore, right? The people that I stayed connected to was my wife and my children and my mum and my dad. But even then, I wasn't communicating with them as much as I normally would. And everybody else just felt like an energy drain that I just could not afford. So when I was in that silence, this is when the fear comes back, right? That old fear, right? That I thought that I had overcome, right? Can I still provide for my family, right? What if I never feel passionate about anything again? What if I end up a failure? Like, who am I without my work, without my coaching, without this? And what if this is permanent? Right? And I just felt like everything was just being fucking ripped from underneath me. My identity, my purpose, and all the meaning that I had constructed was just crumbling down. But underneath all of that fear, underneath all the madness and chaos that was going on inside my head, I still had this belief or this knowing that I just couldn't ignore. And it was telling me to stop running, to stop forcing, to stop fixing, to stop trying to put back everything together. And it was to go within, just to go inwards and sit with what was going on. And meditation had always been something that I'd used heavily. So this is what I did, right? And I stopped building. I stopped trying to force clarity. I stopped trying to just kind of manufacture motivation. And I just got still, right? Really, really still. And for the first time in my adult life, I think probably, I just sat with myself with no agenda, with no plans, with no nothing. Right? I still done my gym and my meditation and my journaling. I still done the basic non-negotiables, but anything outside of my family stuff and like my non-negotiables, there was nothing. Right? And it was in that stillness I came face to face with me. myself. Now, not the version that I had created for success, not the identity wrapped in my business or my role as a coach or the recovering addict or whatever it is that identity I had constructed. It was just me. It was just me, raw, human, scared shitless, but I was real. And that's when I understood, right? This wasn't something that was breaking me down. It was actually, more of a purification. It was a spiritual stripping. And this was, I would say, an initiation to go into the next phase of my life, right? And I felt like I was being punished, but I knew that I wasn't. I knew that I was being prepared because Archangel Michael had told me previously, he said, nothing's by accident, basically. He said, everything that you go through is preparation for the next step. And I reminded the conversation I had, right? And this was what it was. I was being prepared for the next mission, right? There had been a version of me that had been nudging me and wanting to go all in on YouTube for years. But I never had the confidence, I never had the depth to speak with real authority. I didn't believe in myself, right? But then I kept getting these signs and messages that now was the time, right? And they were so clear that I couldn't ignore them, right? And I had this pull to share authentically my story for a long time, but again, I just didn't believe anybody would want to listen. I didn't believe I had enough to say, but I always found a reason to delay it, another project, another excuse, and I would beat myself up. And say, where would I be if I'd done this sooner? How much time have I wasted? But looking back, I wasn't ready. And everything happens for a reason, I believe. And it wasn't because I lacked the skill or knowledge, but I hadn't travelled the road that would give me the experience and the wisdom to speak from. And not just the words, but the actual substance behind the words. So the dark night of the soul, it felt like it was breaking me, but it wasn't. It was breaking me open. It was stripping away everything that wasn't essential. So I could finally, communicate from my core instead of my conditioning. Okay. And that's who I'm speaking to now, right? You might be here in the middle of this, right? And you feel like everything's falling apart and you can't make sense of, the silence. That you might be there like fucking losing your mind, but you're not actually losing it. It just feels like it. You're actually letting go of everything that's not you so you can find your soul. And see, this darkness, this is not your end. This is where the old identity crumbles. So the version of you who you were born to be can finally step in. So you're not losing yourself. You're actually meeting yourself. And the only way out is through, right? And most men break in this period, okay? And let me discuss what destroys most men in this phase. Right, and I'm not telling you this to scare you, but it's so that you can recognize when it hits, because if you can name it, then you can navigate it. And I've went through just about every single thing here. So everything that I speak is from experience, okay? And the first part is the void, right? That's where nothing matters anymore. And this isn't your typical bad day or rough week. This is waking up feeling absolutely fucking nothing. Everything's pointless, right? The things that used to excite you no longer do. You look at your life, your house, your car, your bank account, your family, and you think to yourself, this should make me happy. Why don't I feel anything? Right? You start wondering, am I fucked? Am I broken? You've lost the ability to feel joy, anymore. And this emptiness isn't who you are. It's just who you are in that moment, right? Because here's what's actually happening. Your soul is clearing out false meaning so real purpose can emerge, right? You can't feel excited about things that never truly aligned with who you are, right? The emptiness isn't depth. It's a space being created for something authentic to be born. So don't fight the void. Don't try to fill it with distractions or force yourself to feel something. Just sit in it. Let it show you what actually matters versus what you think should matter. Okay? And then we move into the identity collapse, right? This is the death of who you thought you were. Right? So 40 plus years, right? You think you've known who you are, the provider, the reliable one, right? The guy who's got his shit together. the one who everyone comes to for advice, right? Maybe you're a problem solver, maybe you're strong, right? But now you're looking in the mirror and you're like, who the fuck is this guy staring back? Right? You're feeling lost, confused. You're questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself, right? Who am I if I'm not this successful businessman? Or who am I if I'm not the guy who's got his shit together? And this was for me was one of the most terrifying parts, because my entire sense of self was built on what I'd done, not who I was, right? And I'd been performing a role for so long that I forgot it wasn't who my true identity underneath it all. And see, this collapse, it isn't destruction. It's where, things are revealed to you. Because that constructed identity, that's just a suit that you put on to survive this world. Now you're finally taking it off, and then you're meeting the man you were always meant to be. Okay? And then we look at the isolation. This is where nobody gets you, right? You try to explain what's going on to your wife, and she thinks you're having a midlife crisis, right? You mention it to your friends and they tell you to fucking snap out of it, go on holiday, find a hobby, right? Your family thinks you're depressed, that you should go and see a doctor, right? And this is what happened to me. Maybe your colleagues think that you're fucking burnt out, you need to take time off, right? Nobody understands that this is something that can't be fixed with a pill or solved with a weekend getaway. And nobody gets that you're not broken, you're just changing, right? The true you's being revealed. You're breaking open. And see, the isolation deepens because you can't find the words to explain something that's beyond language. How do you tell someone that everything you thought that was real feels like a lie? How do you explain that you're grieving a version of yourself that never actually existed? Right? The loneliness is part of the process. Right? You're being separated from the crowd so that you can hear your own voice. You're being isolated from external validation so that you can find that internal approval. So you're not crazy, right? You're awake in a sleeping world. Okay? And the next one is, this is what a big trap that men can fall into, is getting medicated, right? Instead of just initiated. Okay? And this is where so many men get derailed. And, if I wasn't, somebody who refuses medication, I refuse to take pills from the doctor, or even my son's got autism and ADHD, and my daughter's got Tourette's and ADHD, and I refuse to get them medicated. And that was something the spirit guides told me a long time ago, was to make sure that my children never get medicated. And I thought it was when we were getting the COVID vaccine thing. But what happens is they go to the doctors, and I went to the doctors, right? And I was explaining what I was going through, and he asked me if I wanted antidepressants, right? And I was on antidepressants for years, and he knows my journey, and I was so surprised that it was the first thing that he came to, right? But the thing is, you feel empty, you feel like you've no motivation, you're disconnected from things that you used to enjoy, so it sounds like depression. And my doctor, like, he was ready to put me on. If I said yes, I would have been back on tablets, okay? And the doctor hears you're feeling low, you're feeling depressed, boom, you're getting prescribed antidepressants. Then you take them because you trust the system and you want to feel better, right? But fucking no, brother. See, the medication, it dulls the pain, but it also dulls the awakening, right? You stop feeling the darkness, but you stop feeling the call for transformation, right? That will manage the kind of surface level symptoms, but it won't address the spiritual crisis underneath. So it's not actually helping, it's making things fucking worse. Now, I'm not saying to people don't take medication. I'm not against medication when it's truly needed, right? It's just something that I don't choose to prescribe to, no pun intended. But too many men are being medicated for spiritual emergencies, not chemical imbalances. You can't medicate your way through a soul initiation. If the root is spiritual, no pill will answer the question that's burning inside you. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my real purpose? Who am I meant to become? Okay? And obviously, if you're really in a bad place, speak to a doctor, right? This is all something that you have to go through. But if you're identifying with what I'm speaking about today and you're clicked on this video, there's a good chance you're going through a dark night of the soul. Okay? And the next one, as men, this is very easy for us to fall into, right? Spiritual bypassing, right? This is where when you're in the void, right? You're desperately seeking answers. So then you become vulnerable to spiritual bypassing. You start consuming content, YouTube videos, podcasts, books. You're looking for someone to give you the map out of this fucking darkness. You're collecting quotes, concept, techniques, man. Fucking, I've got so many qualifications and learning. I've done so much. So this is how I know all about this, right? You learn to do shadow work, energy healing. You learn masculine archetypes, ancient wisdom. You join online communities, and then you start hearing people throw about terms like dark night of the soul, spiritual awakening. But what's really happening is you're trading transformation for information. You're bypassing the actual experience of sitting in that fucking fire by intellectualizing it. You're avoiding the pain that was meant to transform you, right? And this is so dangerous. We need to learn to be able to sit in that pain and alchemize it, right? The dark night of the soul cannot be understood. It has to be lived. No amount of spiritual knowledge will substitute for actual work of sitting with your pain and letting it transform you. Okay? We need to feel it to heal it, right? And the next trap is just feeling like this is going to be like this forever. Like this is permanent loss. And this is what haunted me as well. What if this is permanent, right? What if I never feel alive again? What if the passion never returns, right? What if it's gone forever and I just become this fucking bum failure, right? And you start to believe that the best version of yourself was in the past, that you peaked in your 20s or 30s or whatever. Now it's just all downhill. You'll never feel that excitement you used to feel about goals, work, the gym, life in general, right? And this fear keeps you trapped because you're trying to resurrect a version of yourself that was never you in the first place. Okay? And this is the truth. That version of you had to go, right? The soul you're afraid of losing was never your true soul. It was a constructed identity built on programming, external validation, and social expectations. See the real you, the one that's being created right now in this fucking fire. You're deeper, more authentic, and more powerful than the man that you used to be. But you have to let the old you die completely before the new you can emerge. This is what they talk about, the death and the rebirth. Okay, and there comes a point in this where you have two choices. You can be a victim or you can be a fucking warrior, right? And when you face this choice, this will determine how you live the rest of your life, okay? Because the victim says, oh, poor me, why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. I was doing everything right. Life is so unfair. Fuck that. The warrior, he knows this is happening for me, not to me. This is my initiation. This is preparing me for something greater. And most men choose the victim because it's easier. It allows them to blame external circumstances and avoid taking radical responsibility. Because you're in charge of your transformation, nobody else. So they end up staying stuck in resentment, bitterness, and self-pity. But see those who become that awakened savage, that warrior, they use the pain as fuel. They see the breakdown as a breakthrough. They understand that every great man in history walked through the fire to create his character. The choice isn't made once. It's a daily choice, right? Something's fucking hourly. Every time you feel sorry for yourself, you have to choose again. Am I a victim or am I a warrior? And every time that choice has to be warrior. Okay? And when you're in this, right, your first instinct is to fight it with the same tools that got you the success you've had in life, right? Willpower, discipline, hustle, grinding through the pain. You think, I just need to work harder. I need to push through this. I need to force myself to feel motivated again. This isn't a productivity problem. This isn't something you can mindset your way through. This is a soul initiation. And the more you resist it with force, the more it will break you. Your nervous system is already taxed. Your spirit is fucking exhausted. If you try to muscle through this phase, you will crash physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Right? The dark night requires surrender, not strength. It requires letting go, not holding on. Right? It requires being, not doing. And this is so difficult. I found this so hard to surrender, but it's the best thing that I've ever done. Now, this doesn't mean that you become passive or you give up. No, it means learning to work with the process instead of against it. Okay, and the last one, you know, and a lot of people won't talk about this, right? Because the return. So when you're, let's use the word resurrection for lack of a better word, your return isn't dramatic. There's no big epiphanies and fireworks. There's no sudden moment of clarity. There's no overnight transformation. It's quiet. It's subtle, right? It's so subtle that you don't even notice it until it's happened already. And many men miss their own resurrection because they're expecting something more obvious. They're waiting for the motivation to come roaring back or the passion to ignite like it used to. But the new you doesn't operate like the old you. The fire burns differently, steadier, deeper, more focused. The passion is quieter, but it's more sustainable. And the confidence is calmer, but it's more undeniable. Right? You don't go back to normal because normal was never where you belonged. You rise into something bigger, better, a life built on authenticity instead of approval, right? On purpose instead of constant pressure, and living in the now moment, the present, instead of trying to perform. You know, the return is marked not by what you gain, but what you let go of, what you no longer need. Right? You no longer need to get that external validation to know how amazing you are. You no longer need the constant stimulation, fucking YouTube and all these dopamine hits and whatever it is that you used in the past to feel alive. Right? And that's the promise of the dark night of the soul. Okay? It's not to return to who you were, but to reveal who you've always been underneath all this program and conditioning. The fucking true awakened savage. Now, let me, for you that are more logical thinking, there is science to back this up, okay? Because let me give you an explanation to what's happening to you, right? The dark night of the soul, right? Your brain's default mode network, right? So that's the part that's responsible for your sense of self, your personal narrative, right? That becomes destabilized. And now this is the same network that's active when you're constantly worrying about things, ruminating, you're caught up in those mental loops. So the breakdown of this network, it creates what is called ego dissolution, right? The temporary loss of the constructed sense of who you thought you were. Right? It's similar to what happens when people do these psychedelic trips, ayahuasca, psilocybin, or like deep meditation. But it's happening naturally through your psychological and spiritual stress, right? So your linear thinking patterns, your kind of worry loops, your survival programming, they're all losing their grip on you. And this creates temporary confusion. This is when your emotions are flooding all over the place. And you have this identity disorientation. But if you stay with the process instead of numbing it or escaping it, your brain begins rewiring for kind of greater complexity, resilience, and presence. And then you've got these new neural pathways that form that support authenticity rather than performance, or intuition rather than analysis, or being over doing. Your brain is literally updating its whole operating system. And the confusion you feel, it's just the old software being deleted to make room for the new software. Okay, and this is and what you experience is what Carl Jung, he called it the withdrawal of projection, right? You've spent your whole life projecting your power onto external things, whether that's your job, your achievements, your relationships, your bank account, right? You thought these things gave you identity and worth. Now your psyche is pulling those projections back in, right? Forcing you to find your sense of self from within rather than out there. And this process can be terrifying because it means facing the void, the space between who you thought you were and who you actually are. And most people never cross the void because it requires letting go of everything that's familiar. But see, by crossing the void, this is where individualization happens, where you stop being a product of your conditioning and you start being an expression of who you truly are underneath all the bullshit, your authentic self. Right? Because your nervous system has been in fight or flight mode for years, decades. right? That chronic stress of constantly performing, providing, meeting everyone else's expectation, it has kept your fucking nervous system fucking totally activated. And during the dark night of the soul, your body finally says, fuck it, I've had enough. Your nervous system crashes into what's called the parasympathetic dominance, which is the rest and digest mode. This is why you feel exhausted, unmotivated, and emotionally flat. Right? Your body is forcing you to rest because it knows that you won't do it voluntarily. It's recalibrating your stress response system so that you can operate from a place of calm presence instead of anxious striving. Right? Your nervous system is evolving to support a more sustainable way of being in this world. And if we look at it from a spiritual perspective, right, this is a soul recalibration. The false sense of self built on that external validation, social expectations, and ego attachments, that's being dissolved so then who you truly are can fucking stand up. Right? And the ancient mystics, they called this divine abandonment. The feeling of being basically forsaken by God, right? Or the universe, or however you want to call it, right? But it's not abandonment. It's an invitation to stop seeking the divine outside of yourself and start recognizing that you are God. And I've done a whole video on this. I'll see if I can link it in the comments. But you are God. You're a fractal of God. And this is where faith stops being a feeling and becomes a choice. When you learn to trust the process, even when you can't see the outcome, right? When you discover that you are not just seeking God, you are an expression of God. Okay? And if you just look at how the Stoics dealt with it, Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, right? The Stoics didn't just tolerate suffering, they trained for it. Right? What did Marcus Aurelius say? Everything that happens is either endurable or not. Right? If it's not endurable, then you die. If it is, then endure it. Stop whining. They knew we are not entitled to ease. We are entrusted with challenge. Right? The dark night isn't in the way. It is the way. It teaches you detachment, not from life, but from the bullshit illusions, from comfort addiction, from identity ego, from the lie that strength is the absence of pain. Okay, and even if you look at any of the great warrior traditions, the Shaolin monks, they trained in isolation, silence, repetition. Right? Why? Because in the quiet, you meet the fucking true edges. And the samurais, they were taught that facing death daily was the only path to true life. Not literal death, but ego death. Right? And even in Zen, the dark night is a gate, not one you force your way through, but one that opens only when you bow deeply enough to see that everything being stripped away was never you in the first place. Okay, and once you've went through this is when you have the identity shift, right? This is where everything changes, because when you enter that dark night of the soul, you think you are your thoughts, your roles, your achievements, your problems. But see, when you come out, you're just a witness to all of it, right? And when you shift from identification to observation, that changes everything about how your life and how you move through this whole world. Right? Because before the dark night of the soul, your self-worth was tied to what others thought about you. Right? I used to be so like that. I cared what everybody thought. But now, I don't care what anybody says about me. If they don't like me or they don't fucking think what I'm doing right, that's fine. That's theirs. It's nothing to do with me. Right? I'm my own personal approval. Right? I know my worth. And I know it isn't determined by external circumstances. And yeah, I can receive praise, but I'm not going to get attached to it. And I'll also receive criticism and I won't get destroyed by it. Right? And this doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you free to make decisions based on what's right, not what's popular. Right? Free to speak truth, not what people want to hear. This is where you become your true self. Right? And, it's, even if you look at the role-based identity to your character-based identity, before you were your job title, I'm a businessman, I'm a lawyer, I'm a manager, right? Your identity was wrapped in what you did for work. Now you identify with your character. I'm a man of integrity. I'm someone who speaks truth. I'm a person who serves others. Your identity is rooted in who you are, not what you do. And this shift is so important, right? Because job roles can be taken away. You can get fired, downsized, retired. But see, character is permanent, right? It's who you are regardless of everything that's going around you, on around you in this world. Right. And also for me, I was desperately seeking purpose, reading books, taking courses, assessments, looking for that one thing that would make me feel alive again. But when I went through this, I realized that I don't have to find purpose. I become it. Purpose isn't something you have, it's something you are. You stop asking what's my purpose and you start asking how can I serve? Right? You stop seeking meaning and you start creating it through your presence and your actions. Okay, and your emotions as well. For men, this is so important because I know emotions used to control me, right? And I know a lot of men are the same. Someone criticizes you, you get all defensive. Something didn't go your way, you get angry. Now you're at the mercy of your emotional reactions. Now you have space between stimulus and response. You feel the emotion, but you're not owned by it. You can choose how to respond instead of just reacting automatically. And this is what real emotional intelligence looks like. Not suppressing emotions, but having mastery over them. Being able to feel fully without being controlled by your feelings. Right? And also when I operated out of scarcity. There wasn't enough time, there wasn't enough money, there wasn't enough love, opportunities. Right? I had to, compete, for everything that I wanted. But when I moved through this, I learned to operate from abundance and know that there's enough for everyone. Right? You can be generous with your time, your energy, your resources, because you're not operating from lack, right? Or the fear of lack. This, you know, abundance isn't naive optimism. It's based on a deep knowing that your worth isn't dependent on external circumstances. You can give freely because your sense of self isn't tied to what you have, right? And that's when you move from seeking to serving. Right? Because the old you is probably always seeking success, seeking approval, seeking fulfillment, seeking happiness. Yet you are trying to get something from life. And the new way is focused on serving your family, your community, your purpose, something greater than yourself. Right? And if you're watching this channel and you've been following me, then I believe you're here for something great. That's when you shift from seeking to serving, because that's where you transform from a boy to a man. Right? It turns you from a consumer into a creator, right? A taker to a giver, a follower to a leader, right? And now you've got a true understanding of that. I'm going to give you some tools for your toolbox and how you can rise from this, okay? Because we've had the theory, now it's time for action, right? Because the dark night of the soul strips away everything you're not, okay? This is how you build who you are, right? No more in the void, no more meaningless wallowing. This is time for structure, action. Okay? So the first tool we'll talk about here is, like always, right? Is create a daily ritual of silence, some type of silence, right? Because why? Your mind is fucking noisy. The world is even louder. If you don't claim sacred silence, you will be consumed by the darkness. So this doesn't take long, maybe 10 minutes every morning, no phone, no music, no guidance. Just sit and breathe and feel everything. Big, deep breaths. Right? You're going to have thoughts come in. Don't get caught up in the thoughts. Just watch them. Let your awareness deepen. Right? For example, you get up, right? Alarm goes off, right? Before you touch your phone, accept to turn the alarm off, not snooze button, turn the alarm off and get up, right? You could sit and light a candle, right? Or whatever, or just look out the window, right? Close your eyes, right? Breathe deeply, right? Breathe through your nose, right into your belly, right? Out through your mouth, okay? And just to stay completely still. And you see, if you do this for example, say 10 days in a row, right? No breaks, no excuses. See how you feel. And then, this whole thing is about finding what works for you. I'm just giving you what's worked for me. That might not mean it will work for you, but I think if it's worked for me, it should work for you, but that's not always the case. And that's what I'm saying. I don't have all the answers. I'm just giving you my experience and things that have helped me, right? And when you do that, you shift from emotional chaos to being able to, be present in the moment. And that presence becomes a weapon in so many areas of your life. Okay. Number two, Write the truth you've been avoiding. Now, this is so important because see, unspoken truth, that becomes unconscious sabotage. What you won't admit, you cannot heal. Right, so grab a notebook, title the page, What Am I Afraid to Say Out Loud? Write it raw, no edits, nothing, just whatever comes down. Right, say it out loud to yourself. Then ask yourself, what is this pain teaching me? For example, right, this isn't one for me. I'm terrified I'll never be enough for my family. Right? Say it out loud. Right? Feel it. Then ask yourself, what belief is holding this in place? Right? And then the answer comes. Okay? What happens is you start removing the masks and you meet the man that's underneath the mask. Right? Number 3, and if you've been watching my videos, you'll know that there's always going to be a bit of movement here. Okay? So your body is your fastest way back to presence. Right? You know, movement grounds emotion and strength reinforces identity. So every day train, right? Even if it's only 15, 20 minutes, body weight basics, right? This is about discipline, not aesthetics. Use pain as fuel, okay? Not in a prison, right? For example, if you don't have a gym, right? I believe a gym membership is a non-negotiable, but some people, they just don't have it, right? But that doesn't mean you don't exercise. You can do 100 push-ups, 100 squats, 100 again, paint tin instead of kettlebell swings, paint tin swings, you know, every morning, just do it. In fact, do it all 100 push ups, 100 squats, 100 kettlebell swings or paint tin swings every morning for 21 days, right? I guarantee you that you do that, you will feel the difference. Number 4, right? Do one sacred non-negotiable, okay? Because during the dark night, right? If you have too many choices, it can lead to paralysis, right? But see, if you have just one clear commitment, that equals momentum, right? So choose one habit that will reconnect you to your truth. That for me, it was cold showers, okay? But it could be cold showers, right? 30-minute walks, okay? Nightly breath work, morning breath work. Do that for 30 days, right? Don't miss a day, right? And then let me know how you feel, okay? For example, choose nightly breath work before your bed, right? Every night at 9 p.m, 20 slow breaths in the dark, okay? Do it every day. Don't skip the bad days, right? Your nervous system rewires when you do this. Your mind rebuilds trust in who you are because you're doing what you said you're going to do. And you realize discipline is my medicine, okay? And number 5, this is where we look at energetic boundaries because see, the wrong inputs will drag you back into the void, okay? So cut out anything that dulls your soul, right? Gossip, porn, alcohol, drugs, shallow scrolling, draining people, okay? And replace it with, you know, warrior text, sacred text, honest conversations, nature, the gym, right? For example, unfollow every account on Instagram that makes you feel inferior or numb, and then replace it with books like Meditations or The Kabbalion, right? Block notifications, right? You design your world, okay? Because when you do that, you protect your power, you reclaim your focus, and you become harder to manipulate and impossible to numb, okay? And number 6, choose a higher path, right? Because a dark night breaks men who stay silent, right? It builds men who will speak their rebirth into existence. So look at your life. What is your mission? What is your soul calling you to create or start? Right? Share it with someone you trust. Right? You know, it could be anybody, you know, somebody that you can openly express and you're not going to feel, you know, judged or whatever. But this is the thing, you need to declare it. So, for example, you declare, right, I'm going to become the strongest, most spiritually grounded father I've ever been. Right? No more half living. Right? Then you text it to your brother, right? Or you might even have a WhatsApp group with your friends. You post it in there. But most importantly, you live it, right? Because when you're accountable to someone, you've got more chance of following through, right? So you move from victim to visionary, right? And then you get out of that isolation and you're into alignment, right? You're no longer surviving, you're becoming sovereign, right? And the last one, which I find is super important, is find or build your brotherhood, right? Because no warrior walks alone. Isolation was necessary, but see now moving forward, community is essential, right? So Join a men's group. Start one if you can't find one, right? Build a 3-man circle of brothers, people you know on this path, right? For example, just message 2 men who you respect, right? Start with a check-in once a week, a call per week. Create a space where you can openly discuss from truth, not from ego. Discuss your real wins, your real struggles, your spiritual growth, right? We're not here to do this alone. We're here to walk with men who speak the same language as us, and we can rise together. This is why I created this channel. I'm not doing this for likes and validation. I'm doing this because I know I'm here for a reason, a purpose, and it's here to help change the world in some kind of way. And I'm now calling in my clan, right? Your vibe is your tribe. So I'm creating this space because I want to share this journey with brothers who are on the same journey with the same intentions, the same, desire and passion to make the world a better place as I have. And that's this whole reason I do this. Okay? Because most men don't survive this phase, right? They numb it, they escape it, it gets misdiagnosed with depression, they end up on medication, or they just fucking fail, right? And they break, unfortunately, and then what happens is they stay broken. Okay, but if you're watching up to this point, I know that is not you. Right? You are fucking stronger. You're built for this because you're not going to avoid it. You're going to fucking rise through it. And this is not a breakdown. This is your rebirth. And if you've made it this far, it means that you are here for a reason. You are part of my tribe, my circle. And I don't mean mine as in I own it, but we are here together on this path together. Right? And the work you do is not just for yourself, it's for everyone else. So if you rise, you don't rise alone. You bring the others with you. Because see, the man who survives the night, guess what? He becomes the lighthouse. So if you're in the dark right now, brother, I promise you, you're not alone. Right? But just comment below. I'm still here, so I know that you're here. Right? And if you know another man who's lost out there in the shadows, send this to him. Because maybe that's what he needs right now to help him rise out of his darkness. And as always, I love you guys. I appreciate you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I will catch you on the next one. I'll have another video here and you can subscribe here. Take care.